Hello, all you fellow dusty dogs and travelers of the trail out there, and welcome to another episode of D.I.Yote Bites, a bite-sized audio podcast-style series where I ramble for a bit about me, my life, and my interests. On today's episode, I'll talk about the steps it takes for me to go from starting a book to self-publication, and why I hate the recent trend of AI-generated books as both a writer and a reader. Enjoy! A while back, I saw some news on social media that was kind of distressing to me as a writer. The article said that self-publishing sites were going to reduce rates given to creatives because of people unsubscribing. And people are unsubscribing because of a recent influx of machine-generated, or AI, works that is making it difficult to find either decent content or something just not written by a machine. This has a different effect than you might think. Instead of telling self-publishing sites that they're not a fan of the AI-generated works, the publishing companies have a much more for-profit motive alignment. The rate reductions are thus because the site doesn't want to spend money on something if people aren't using it. So if there's less people, the companies are using this as justification for, there's not as much demand, we can't pay you as much. There's really very little that authors can do to stop this sudden influx. An author, and I put this in heavy air quotes, of AI-generated work doesn't necessarily have to work as hard as I would say most self-publishing people do, and likely even less than people who go through queries to an in-house publisher. AI can push out books in a fraction of the time and, along with the generated cover art, are getting them out there like a wildfire. To the point where it feels like they're almost literally a dime a dozen. Lowered rates don't quite matter if you can just push one out after the other. And the more I've seen it, the scarier it gets. I remember using a few prompts back when it was, haha, this is funny, this won't take over the industry, right? Back when it was silly fun to see what kind of smeared nonsense it would come up with. But they're getting better in a way that isn't good. I've seen ads on TV for YouTube for stuff like Grammarly, which now claims it can do something as complex as writing songs about certain topics, or writing emails about a project, or even coming up with essays. And while I haven't read any of the books myself, a quick look at a simple AI prompt generator is a clear enough look that they're, at minimum, getting more coherent. The main point I wanted to say here is this. This should be distressing to those of us who care about writing as a creative pursuit, because this is devaluing the months of work a non-generated piece takes. Now, I'm speaking about this mostly as a novel writer, but I'm sure that there are short story writers out there who are not feeling comfortable about this either. And I'm pretty sure stuff like the songwriting features are going to make poets feel uneasy not too far down the line. But as a reader, you have to understand that most of what you're reading when you pick up a book is something that took months to complete even the initial stages. Even this essay, just under 5,000 words in the making, underwent a lot of refinement and editing. It means it took a few months to go from thought to page to microphone. The problem has been stated before, even prior to AI becoming a thing. This is a point that other authors have noticed as an emphasis on product over process. Companies are more in mind for the product and are looking for ways to increase output, which increases their profit. Most writers I know are against AI because they are more on the process end. They are in writing for the creative and artistic pursuit, and eventually go to publication because they want to share that work. Most of us writers are not necessarily trying to create bestsellers, but to have a few people purchasing the book as justification that the book should be shared to a wider audience. While I don't want to spend too much time on this, it should be emphasized. AI works are barely even machine learning. It is done by feeding existing words and works into a lexicon and then using that as an algorithmic basis. Without feeding existing works into AI, it does not learn or create its own variations or uses. It simply regurgitates the same thing it already knows based on whatever rule sets have been applied to it. It cannot even create better works, as it relies on said database and can only pick from said database to create its works, meaning that it has no access to imagination or pickiness about word selection that really makes both the process and product of writing and why most of us choose it. When we've entered an era where AI has already admitted that it requires learning from existing works to feed the machine, that's a further devaluation of my own time. I already don't get much out at a time, and it takes me fighting both tooth and nail to get the work finished, and then someone already wants to feed it into a machine to repeat what I just fucking said? You see where an author might start getting tired of this? Essentially, as a member of the writing industry, what I want to do is take a few minutes here to explain my process. What I hope a fellow writer comes out of this with is the love and care and time I put into my work, and why these rate changes are problematic for writers as a whole. I don't want to be convinced to use AI. I want others to know that the bright, bold, new, innovative ideas are probably not going to come out of something that is procedurally generated. And ideas like that probably need the time and gestation to fine-tune instead of being forced out of the clip layout. Nor that such work should be fed into the machine, as the machine itself limits the scope and intent of the work, while devaluing the actual human effort into putting a work to paper. What I hope a listener or reader comes out of this discussion with is the sheer amount of effort and, again, time it takes for a book to come from idea to completion, especially on the reader's end, where I take grievous offense to things like articles from Forbes that suggest writing is something done as an easy side hustle for a few bucks. Flippant mentions like that reduce the perception and impact of the work that is needed for a book, even without factoring AI into the equation. I am in agreement with other authors that anyone who wants to write a book can, but I'm also of the opinion that anyone who wants to write a book should be well aware of the level of work and gravity of the undertaking that they're about to embark on. Writing is about the persistence and grit of creation scrabbling to the surface, wanting to be told against the odds, as much as it is about the times when the writing is freely flowing. What I'm going to do now is give a general overview of my writing process and how I go about writing a book from start to finish. I've self-published quite a few books now. When writing this episode's draft, I was working on preparing a 7th book for publication and the 2nd edition of a previous novella. I'm going to break down the major phases, what I do during them, and how I've gobbled together multiple methods from multiple other authors talking about the craft, and melded them into something that mostly works for me. We're also going to produce a little experiment. I'm going to work with ideal averages based on how many words and chapters I have in my current books. Among my 7 completed books so far, I have an average word length of 95,000 words per book. Usually for me, that translates to around 270 pages in my usual formatting, and an average of about 18 chapters. These will be important for later stages, so keep these in mind. We're also going to say for a hypothetical new book, I start on January 1st of the new year, so we have a nice and even start point. With that, let us begin. Phase 1 is just note-taking. I'm very much what is referred to as a plotter, who likes to know all the details I need to hit ahead of time, so the first month is just making sure that I have all of those details in place. Of particular importance would be any real defining features or personality traits of the major characters, as well as informing myself of any potential twists or things I'll need to know to start setting them up early. For one of my smaller books, The Night of the Unicorn, I was heavily reliant on both a twist and on poetry, and I made 8 whole pages of notes to make the poems and develop the whole plot before I'd ever written a word for the novel itself. Because stuff like that can be risky, it is sometimes worth the time and effort to put that together. Phase 2 is the first draft. I'll explain later how I don't really use standard drafts, but basically this is just getting the whole thing out on paper. We'll start using the averages here. My average book size is about 95,000 words, and I'll even say that my average writing day when I'm on a roll is about 800 words. That's not a lot, barely a page and a half in most word processors. But the first thing to understand is I'm not doing writing as a career. I have a full-time job and enjoy my writing in my spare time. It's easy to integrate this smaller amount into a full-time work schedule. But now it's time to do some simple math. To see how long an average first draft would take, we'll take that 95,000 words average book length and divide that by the 800 words per day average, which gives us a total of about 119 days to complete if I'm writing every single day. But we'll increase that to a full 135 days, or just over the 4 months of February, March, April, and May, because there are some days where I just plain don't write at all, because I'm exhausted or have other plans. And there are some days where I manage to get a little ahead of that average count and make up a bit of progress. But otherwise, by the end of the draft, we're now at May heading into June. Phase 3 is relatively simple, a 1-month break. This is a tactic picked up from Stephen King in his excellent book on writing. Essentially, the idea is to leave the manuscript alone for a good while, don't open the file, hide physical copies away from somewhere, and try to barely think about it. This is done to come back with fresh eyes and be able to review it more critically now that you at least have the thing down on paper, so you can tell what stays and what goes. So for the month of June, we do nothing. Phase 4 is where we pick the book back up and begin editing. I do 4 rounds of major edits, and I tend to work on about a chapter a day. I don't do drafts usually, but I do turn on the track changes option in my word processor as I make edits and review them once the round is done. Now the average chapter length comes into play, as I tend to do the 18 chapters at about a chapter per day, both because I'm not a professional editor and need to be careful, and because I've learned about a chapter a day is good enough for me to focus and stay on track without wearing myself out and missing something. Also, after about the first chapter, it just evolves into reading the damn thing because I've now taken an interest in seeing where it goes to. This also follows the same problems as writing. Some days I don't edit because I have other plans, or work wears me out and I don't get around to it. To accommodate for that, we'll use a 1 month per round estimate. July will be spent doing what I call grammar and coherence edits, making sure the thing is readable. August will be editing character personalities and making sure their actions are consistent throughout the book. September will be spent reviewing plot threads and continuity, making sure that all my twists and plot events are adequately set up. And October's final round is me reading the whole thing aloud, because sometimes I tend to change punctuation or wording based on how it sounds aloud. And if I can read it smoothly while talking it out, it will go faster reading it in my head. Phase 5 in the month of November now marks another month-long break from the book. I've just spent another 4 months doing heavy mental work, I would say almost heavier than the initial draft, and definitely want some time to chill before coming back to it with fresh eyes again. November in this case also tends to be something of a hectic time no matter when I started the book, so in this ideal schedule, this is set aside so that the main holiday rush is over. Even if I didn't quite start at the beginning of the year, November tends to be a lag period anywhere where stuff gets slow because of family business, work business, holiday business, that sort of thing. December's Phase 6 is a rather short and simple one because of more holiday and family events. It's just spent reading through, making slight edits. This is now round number 5 after the draft is completed. And a key thing of making sure my own interest is still high. This is where I decide if I want to let this thing sit on the back burner and bring it out later, or if I'm well and truly invested in it and want to see this thing through. If not, I can always start again on a new project in the new year. If I am still invested, I set it aside for the end of the year holidays to pick it back up in the new year. Phase 7 now marks January of year 2, and where I as a self-publisher send it off to my service of choice for the first physical proof copy. While reading this copy, I will open up a Word document or take a piece of paper and write down the page and paragraph number of anything that still needs changed. Then I'll go back through, fix all the new edits, reformat, and send it off for another proof copy. This takes less time to go through than the editing phases, but I'll still usually do 4 or 5 rounds of the proof before I'm getting satisfied with it. While the structure is slightly less defined here, some lag times with shipping coverage means this still takes about 3 months or so, and we're finally done with this phase by March of year 2. Phase 8 is when I start thinking about cover art. While done partially in tandem with phases 6 and 7, my time for those is deciding what I want the cover to look like. I am frankly a terrible artist, so I will either attempt something minimalist or commission for someone for cover art so it looks nice. So on the ideal, expect April or May being spent commissioning art, going over business and payment details, including a portion of royalties, getting artist information for credit, and turnaround time. Phase 9 is our final format and readiness checks. This is ordering the final proof copies, doing final read-throughs to make sure it's as clean as I can get it, and making sure I get my cover art square on the cover, and final formatting to make sure the interior looks good. The book is now ready for release preparation by the end of June or July of year 2. Bringing us to a grand total of 18 months after the first notes were taken and the idea began. Of course, there are a few caveats. The first one is obvious. These are averages, and longer books will take longer for each stage of working on the manuscript. Notable instances are one of my books, Life is an Unwritten Book, which had 22 chapters and took the longest during the editing phases. Ace in the Hole had over 160,000 words and took the longest so far to write. Second is that these all assume I'm able to work on the book at a constant pace. which, given I have potentially undiagnosed ADHD and get distracted easily, have anxiety issues paired with a slight OCD, and I'm an introvert who works retail and thus gets drained easily from being out all day, means I usually don't work at a constant pace. I probably could add in another month, at least, to phases 2, 4, 5, and 7, just because I will have quite a few days where my brain simply goes, nope, can't do it today, sir. Third is that month of December. This is a point where I've written and edited a whole book of as many as 100,000 words and have the entire capacity to put it aside because it won't work. Either that means a new book gets started in January and nothing new comes out, or else I restart the book in January and have to go through the whole process over again anyways. This has happened 3 times. All 3 entries in my informal Dawson Sisters trilogy set, Life is an Unwritten Book, Ace in the Hole, and The Prince and the Gunslinger, took years to complete, with 2 of them taking 7 years and 3 entirely new drafts, and 1 taking 5 years and 2 entirely new drafts, because I'd hit that December mark and need to either set them aside or restart. Fourth is that if this feels slow at any point, it's because I'm the only one doing the work here. Self-publishing work is a slow process because you're the editor, manager, seller, and advertiser all rolled into one. Even for someone going through publishing for a house, that is, getting an agent going through a major publisher, I'd still say going through phases 1 through 6 in that initial year is probably a good idea to make sure the manuscript is ready for querying so you have something that you both believe in and is relatively clean. But it's also good because you learn to love the craft and care put into the words and the works. So now we have to go back to the issue of AI coming in here and cranking out books like there's no tomorrow. If the previous explanation of me going through my process is any indicator, I absolutely cannot. I also think it's unreasonable to assume that an author can keep up with that pacing without some form of burnout. For me, even if there's occasionally some overlap, you can assume that there's about 12 to 14 months between the start of one book and me getting ideas down for the next. Mostly because I tend to wait until nearly the proof stages and thus something is fairly well along before starting the next one. Now, there are lots of prolific authors out there who are known for cranking out books. I go down to my local thrift shop or antique mall and see dozens upon dozens of books for authors like Dean Koontz or Nora Roberts or Zane Grey. But I'm going to hazard a guess and say that's not normal. That the average novel writer isn't just tearing through books like a soulless automaton that needs neither food nor drink nor sleep, nor even something to take its mind off anything other than writing. There are both physical and social needs to attend to, and it's important to the writing spirit to take care of them even in the midst of a good day of writing. If we're talking averages here, a writing career is probably closer to my pacing at the time of this essay's draft. I'm getting ready to release book number 6, getting proof edits ready for book 7, and getting notes together for book 8. This is also in a career where my first book of the set was started in 2015, about 10 whole years ago of this recording. And while that output seems fairly steady, this also doesn't take into account that 2 of those books took 7 years from start to finish, or that they began as one thing and eventually changed into something else entirely. This is all combining to make this influx of AI generation problematic for small-time authors like me. I don't have the power of a publishing house behind me to push my book forward. And truly, with the weird genre mixes I have, plus a tendency towards the anthropomorphic, which ends up leaning me more towards the niche crowd based on pure expectations alone, I doubt I will ever be published by one of the major houses. I also don't really have the money to spend on advertising or efforts to stem the tide. I'm dealing with rent, car payments, gas money, insurance, and food on a retail low-level supervisor pay. I don't have the kind of money to really wage any kind of dedicated assault or campaign against it. To be completely honest, essentially the fact that I have a couple of readers who purchase the book in either print or ebook formats is what puts me into the black when producing a self-published book. I'm reliant on those royalties to make anything from this. And I'm small enough, it's never enough for me to make a living out of it. I sometimes joke that you can tell I really like doing this and want to do this for fun, because there's no way in hell I'd be able to make a car payment from my royalties. But I won't get anything at all if the publishing industry keeps reducing rates because people keep unsubscribing from services. So, what am I in it for again? The process. I love watching a story unfold. I like reading over to see what happens both during the editing stages and just recapping where I was when I left off. I self-publish not for the money, but to say, look at this, look what I made! Like a child coming home after school with the day's art project. Royalty payments are almost the adult version of having the work pinned up to a board or stuck under the refrigerator. And the reviews are like getting it submitted for the end of the year art fair. It is often difficult to get this mentality out to the public. Even with the advent of social media, it is difficult for us to really show a writer working, to show that joy of creating and thriving on something. Artists have it easier. Work in progress sketches or time lapses are far more physical forms of progress, where a book may sit for a while for a thought to gel, a thought that may come up in chapter 2 but not come to fruition until chapter 9. The closest thing I've been able to manage at some point is starting a potential hashtag, Don't Break the Chain. Taken initially from comedian Jerry Seinfeld, but expressed by a number of other creatives. Matter of fact, I first heard about it from musician Danny Sexbang Avedon talking about it on Game Grumps. It's basically the process of writing something down, or drawing, or whatever creative aspiration you have, marking it on the calendar, and continuing that string as long as you can. So I write something for a work in progress, post something on social media, and keep that up as a method of accountability and a method of showing a writer working on something in the time it takes. Even that method has its faults. Some days I don't work on projects, most days AI advocates are posting like wildfire, and my little hashtagged post is, comparatively, a drop in the bucket. To those of us who are in it for the process, AI is discouraging, not encouraging. AI will never truly come close to getting the actual idea the generator had down, only an approximation of it. The work one puts into generating the idea or a prompt could have been better spent actually choosing and exploring, and making it personal rather than impersonal and distant. Algorithms like Grammarly Go have ads that, if you actually look at the changes, either sound worse, becoming more elaborate, or purple prose where the original with fewer words would do, or they sound denuded and lifeless, meant more for work emails and buzzwords than true emotion. Primarily, the artist who works by hand and chooses words for their worth or purpose get shunned by AI enthusiasts for the mere idea of throwing shit on the wall to see what sticks, instead of a reliable, easy method of getting product. Profit is the primary motive or driving force behind it, not actual emotion or word selection that zings on the page, or captivating stories that sound like someone telling it to you across a campfire at a backyard barbecue. Those who do show emotion are watched quietly, given a nod, and then have their work thrown into the machine to crunch it like a wood chipper and destroy it to be rebuilt for their own means, which will turn out nothing like what the original work was made for. That is enraging. And if you still insist that, despite pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into a work, you know, the things that make a work personal, poignant, and emotionally resonant, that I use AI generation to get that out quicker, avoid the pitfalls of the process, you're missing the point. The point is that it means more when the work comes from the heart, rather than the soulless production line of an artless machine. So, what is a writer or reader to do? The best thing to do on both ends is basically to unperson AI-generated works. Don't read it, don't give it reviews, don't give it views, don't even hate purchase it. Leave it be. Leave the generators be. And support the writers and authors and other creatives who are out here trying to actually hone our craft instead of just giving it all up to the machines. Fiction loves to talk about a machine uprising. We always forget that some of it is because we decided to hand that power over to them first, without considering the consequences. And that has been your bite-sized nugget of storytelling for today. I hope you enjoyed it and amused you as much as it amuses me. If you liked hearing me ramble, hit the like button on the video and hit subscribe to be notified when the next bite-sized episode comes out. You can also support the series by donating to my Ko-fi page, kofi.com/DIYote_gaming. But for now, it's time for me to head out. So until we meet again on these dusty trails, have a howling good day. Take care.